ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ තෙරුවන් සරණයි. තෙරුවන් සරණයි ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ.
තෙරුවන් සරණයි.
Okay, Bhante. Let's get started.
Okay, let us begin our metta recital. I think we continue doing like yesterday. We just recite metta and meditate quietly and then start Dhamma talk. The instructions are already registered. In case somebody needs instructions, let me know. Otherwise, we recite this and go right away for silent meditation. But metta recital we must do every day. May all beings be happy and secure. May all beings have happy minds. Whatever living beings there may be, without exception, weak or strong, long, large, medium, short, subtle or gross, visible or invisible, living near or far, born or coming to birth, may all beings have happy minds. Let no one deceive another, nor despise anyone anywhere. Neither from anger nor ill will should anyone wish harm to another. As a mother would risk her own life to protect her only child, even so towards all living beings, one should cultivate a boundless heart. One should cultivate for all the world a heart of boundless loving friendliness, above, below, and all around, unobstructed, without hate or resentment, whether standing, walking, sitting, lying down, or whenever awake. One should develop this mindfulness, this called divinely dwelling here, not falling into erroneous views, but virtuous and endowed with vision, removing desire for sensual pleasures. One comes never again to birth in the womb. With this metta thought in the background, let us try to do this silent meditation. When we don't give more instructions, we have more time to meditate. So if you need any instructions, anybody, or if there's a new person, then let me know. Then we can focus only on that person through emails. Dukkha patta cha nidukkha, bhaya patta cha nibhaya, soka patta cha nisoka, hontu sabbe pipanino. May the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear-struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. So too may all beings be. With this metta wish, let us focus our mind on the talk this morning on the Bojjhanga. Today we go to the sutta again. The Buddha says when one is when one practices meditation, one would know the factors of enlightenment arising. How do we know? How do we know that they are factors of enlightenment? Well, for instance, number one is mindfulness. Mindfulness appear in several places, like four foundations of mindfulness. The entire discourse, as we have been discussing all along, we talk about mindfulness. In factors of enlightenment, also we talk about mindfulness. Then faculty of spiritual faculties, we talk about mindfulness. Spiritual strength, we talk about mindfulness. Sati is mindfulness. We hear in the Satipatthana, there we hear the word mindfulness. Then Bojjhanga, Sati Sambojjhanga, we hear the word about mindfulness. Then Sati Indriya. Indriya is faculty, mindfulness faculty. Then Sati Bala, mindfulness, strength of mindfulness. All these are mindfulness. Now, wherever mindfulness arises, that mindfulness belongs to the mindfulness factor of enlightenment. Whether it appears in Satipatthana, faculties, strength, spiritual strength, or the Bojjhanga factors of enlightenment. There are Bojjhangas recited for curing diseases. For instance, when Venerable Mahakassapa was sick, this was recited, and Venerable Mahakassapa had already attained full enlightenment, and yet when he listened to the factors of enlightenment, his mind focused totally on the strength, power, meaning of factors of enlightenment. And then his mind became so calm, relaxed, peaceful, he recovered from his sickness. So, therefore, the mindfulness, the factors of enlightenment, also has healing power. Now, therefore, wherever the factors of enlightenment, mindfulness, in this case, number one, mindfulness, wherever it arises, all of them different in names, but the meaning is the same. And therefore, when you read Buddhist books, listen to Dhamma talks, practice meditation, whenever you have mindfulness, try to understand that it is the factor of enlightenment. Then, the discourse in the, since we are dealing with Mahasatipatthana Sutta, that sutta says, here there being the mindfulness, enlightened factor in him, that means when a meditator knows, the mindfulness arises. That person becomes mindful. When mindfulness arises, that person, he or she, understand, recognize that this is mindfulness. When it is there, a bhikkhu understands there is the mindfulness enlightened factor in me. When it arises, he knows that it arises, that he recognizes this is the factor of enlightenment, mindfulness factor. Or there being no mindfulness enlightened factor in him, he understands there is no mindfulness factor of enlightenment in me. So that is very easy, very simple. You have to be mindful to understand mindfulness. You have to understand that I am not mindful, therefore this moment mindfulness factor of enlightenment is not in me. The moment you become mindful of mindfulness, then you know this is in me. This mindfulness is in me. So, and he also understands how there comes to be the arising of mindfulness factor of enlightenment, and how the arisen mindfulness factor of enlightenment comes to fulfillments by development. Now, what is the mindfulness? In the first place, we must know what mindfulness is, to be mindful, and understand that it is mindfulness. We talk about mindfulness in many places, many ways, and so much interpretation, explanation are there that they are enough to confuse people and don't know what mindfulness is. We have written books, given talks, written articles, and this is very popular words these days, and we all talk about mindfulness. But I like to give very specific meaning. It is not my meaning. The meaning of mindfulness I give, we find in the discourses, Buddha's own teaching. What is that mindfulness? That mindfulness is, we have to remember this very clearly, for without understanding what mindfulness is, we don't know whether we are mindful or not. True mindfulness is becoming aware of what is happening without greed, hatred, or delusion. Without greed, hatred, and delusion, the mind becomes aware of what is happening at any given moment. Friends, at any given moment, what if we pay total attention to our own experience? What we experience at any given moment is something rising and falling without remaining anything behind. It is called in Pali ahutva sambhoti hutva nirujyati. Anavasesa nirujyati. Something arises, something that was not there before. Something that was not there before arises, and that what is arisen passes without leaving any trace behind. And that is what is happening all the time. For instance, we pay attention to our breath. When we pay attention to our breath, only when breath arises we become aware of the breath. This moment, not last moment breath or future moment's breath, but the moment of breath that arises right now, at that moment, the mindfulness or awareness also arises. Consciousness arises, the breath touches certain places, nostrils or upper lips or chest or wherever, we notice that, and then immediately it moves from that particular point. When breath arises, it doesn't stick to anything, it doesn't stay fixed. It arises, and touching that particular place, the breath moves. When we inhale and when we exhale, also it does the same thing. But we do not see appearance and disappearance of what is. We notice the appearance and disappearance of that which was not there before and then arise and pass away. Similarly, certain feelings arise. That particular feeling was not there before, and now it arises, and then it moves from that point to the next point. Since our awareness is not very sharp, the feeling appears to our mind as one particular experience, always moving. That is not so. Feeling arises very quickly and passes away. Then next moment. Every moment of that similar feeling arises and and gradually the intensity of that feeling fades away. Originally it is very intense, very sharp, and sometimes unbearable, or originally it is very mild, very soft, gentle, even unnoticeable, and gradually increases. It is not the same feeling, but as the feeling continues repeatedly, another feeling, another feeling, another feeling, and then the points of feeling rising, 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 falling, rising, falling, and then it comes to a certain point where it becomes unbearable. The unbearable state is not at the beginning, nor does it always remain the same. So we become without, when painful feeling arises, normally we get upset, angry, sad, disappointed. Without such emotional reaction, becoming aware of that feeling for that feeling per se, for its own strength, for that moment, to that kind, and then let it go. And then when pleasant feeling arises, a pleasant feeling when arises, normally we like to have it. That is why underlying tendency of pleasant feeling is desire, greed. So we do not let the pleasant feeling become an object of our desire, of greed. And because the pleasant feeling also is subject to change. And we know that, and therefore when it arises, we just become aware of it, and at at the beginning, pleasant feeling also may not be very noticeable. It is coming out of our maybe neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling. But later on it slowly increases, and then come to a peak, and then it slowly fade away, disappears. And this nature of that particular pleasant feeling, we understand, we become aware of it without trying to hold on to it. And then neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling arises. Sometimes people become confused because they don't know whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, and they become confused because they don't see the beginning of neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling, nor they do know the end of the neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling, and therefore they get confused. So when we are really mindful, and when the mindfulness is very sharp, we know the beginning of neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling and the end of neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling. How do we know that? When, say for instance, you have painful feeling. When painful feeling disappears, then neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling arises, and then neither pleasant unpleasant, then when the pleasant feeling arises, neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling disappears. So we can see the beginning of pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling. In between feeling is unnoticeable because it is so sort of unnoticeably subtle. So we understand that. Like this, when greed arises, we become aware of how that makes us painful. When hatred arises, we become aware of how it is painful. I mean, greed arises with pain. Hatred arises with pain. Delusion arises with confusion. So when these things happen, the person who is mindful will not fall a prey to any of these feelings, but impartially, without any prejudice or bias, becomes aware of that particular feeling's beginning and middle and end. So mindfulness is so sharp, so clear, that the person that time knows, now our mindfulness factor is there. That mindfulness is there. This is mindfulness. I, without saying I, this phenomenon, that person notice. Noticing that is called mindfulness. In other words, trying to pay attention to whatever is arising this very moment without greed, hatred or delusion, or without getting carried away with that, as just like watching a third person, objectively paying attention to know the reality of that experience. That is why from the very beginning, in the discourse, Buddha said, Anissitocha viharati nacha kinchi loke upadhyati. Anissita means leaning against something. Nissita means leaning. Anissita means without leaning, without what you call, trying to support oneself. Because when we lean against something, then our situation is shaky. That is not normally people think. For instance, they think if you want to be very steady, you lean against something like a chair, back support, you lean against it. When somehow if this back support breaks, you fall. And therefore leaning on something or depending on something or someone is shaky. It is not steady. So Buddha said, Nisitancha chalati. Chalati means shaking. Nisita means leaning against. When we lean against something, we are unsteady, not steady. Anisitang na chalati. When we do not lean against something, we stand on our own feet, on our own strength. So, when the mindfulness is there, Buddha said, Anissitocha viharati. The mindful practitioner does not depend on anything because nothing is reliable. Nothing is dependable. They all try to betray us, pull the rug out under our feet. And therefore, mindful person, without leaning against anything, what are the things we are leaning against? We lean against our body, against our feelings, perceptions, thought, volition, consciousness. These are things we depend on. But they are unreliable. We cannot depend on them because they themselves are subject to change, disappear, without giving us any prior notice. When they change, we fall. Therefore, nacha kincha loke upadhyati. Upadhyati means holding. Loke means this world. The what world? This five world made up of these five aggregates. So, nothing in these five aggregates is there reliable, dependable, trustworthy. They all betray us. Therefore, that kind of awareness is called mindfulness. When that arises, normally it is not always there, present. So, when we meditate, all sort of things happen, mind goes here and there, and not steady, we don't have concentration, not very clear, and so forth. Then we know that the fact of enlightenment, the fact of mindfulness is not in us. That is very simple. Then gradually and slowly all the disturbances from the mind disappear. Disturbances not coming from outside. They are all within ourselves, because we have seen so many things in the past, heard so many things, smelled so many things, tasted so many things, touched so many things, thought so many things. They all are collected and they all are stored. At least they are memories. And they, one after the other, arise, and the mind goes to one object that we have seen, goes to one sound that we have heard, goes to one smell that we have smelt, and so on. Mind keeps going, digging into those memories. Or when the memories arise, mind is there. And therefore, for a certain period of time, as they arise, person will not be mindful. But if the person is mindful of the sight, then that person sees that sound, sight, vision that arose, fades away without leaving a trace. Because that is not permanent. That's not permanent. And when you hear a sound, remember a sound of music, words or talks and so forth, and you see that sound stays in the mind for a while and disappears. So it is impermanent. So you see them, you can use those disturbing factors as part of your meditation, as subject of your meditation, to see their impermanent nature, their unsatisfactory nature, their selfless nature. When the person sees their impermanence, unsatisfactoriness and selflessness, that is how the person becomes mindful, and that mindfulness becomes a factor of enlightenment. So, then to sum up what mindfulness is the state of mind that we want to cultivate without greed, hatred or delusion, or trying to cling to anything, without trying to depend on them, without trying to leaning on them. As they are, they arise and pass away. And this is what is called Yata Bhuta Jnana Darsana. The knowledge, mindfulness knows things as they really are. When we see them as they really are, we know that we are mindful, and that is a factor of enlightenment. The things as they really are means that they always changing. That is that is the true nature of everything. So this seeing things as they really are means with our wisdom eye we see body, feeling, perception, thought and consciousness are in a state of flux, in the state of motion. They are activities rising and falling, appearing and disappearing. No matter where we are, in what position we are, this awareness is called mindfulness. I think, friends, when we have this in mind, we know, I am mindful. This is mindfulness. When we don't have that and all things, we get carried away with all these things, we know, I am not mindful. I am not mindful. Now let me see what is happening. Let me see what is happening. Let me see what is happening. What is happening is rising, falling, rising, falling, rising, falling, rising, falling, rising, falling. Everything is like that. Buddha destroyed all 62 views by this one weapon, that is seeing impermanence of all of them. He used one word, that is impermanence of contact. In Digha Nikaya, he repeatedly said, Tadapi Phasapachya, Tadapi Phasapachya, Tadapi Phasapachya, for each view of 62 view. This view also depends on contact. This view depends on contact. This view depends on contact. 62 views he overcame by knowing that they are impermanent. Contact disappears. Contact disappears. He gave a simile of net, fishing net. The first sermon is called Brahmajala Sutta. Brahmajala means, Brahma means the best. Jala means net. The best net is the net that has so tiny holes that when you throw it into a pool or somewhere to catch fish, once the fish is caught, that fish cannot get free from that net, because any time the fish tries to escape the net, he came to the fiber of the net, the hole of the net. That moment he touches and then withdraw. Touches, he cannot go through that, and then he withdraws. Again touches to escape, and then cannot go through, and then withdraw. So all the 62 fish were caught in this net of mindfulness factor of enlightenment. He defeated all his Maras, 10 armies of Maras, using the factor, mindfulness factor of enlightenment. So friends, with this I end this morning's talk, and next time I will continue. Each factor of enlightenment I explain in this way to have a sort of a comprehensive understanding of factors of enlightenment. I talk today only on the mindfulness factor, and next time I talk on investigation factor. What is investigation, how we do such and so forth, whether we have it or not, and so forth when we practice meditation. With this, I want to end this morning's session I want to wish you all for participating in this. At the same time, I want to make our very regular daily wish. May all those, especially this series of talks we started, wanting to wish all these suffering people be free from suffering very quickly, return to normal life. And the other thing is for our people who like to learn Dhamma, and since they most of them work from home, they are home, and then it would be easy for them to listen to Dhamma, and therefore I thought of using this series. Now I want to wish once again all those who are in hospitals, taken care of by nurses and very compassionate nurses and doctors and hospital staffs, may they be relieved from their suffering and then return to normal life. And those who are very compassionate, those physicians, nurses and hospital staffs who sacrifice their lives out of compassion, may they not get this virus and continue their wonderful, noble service for the humanity. And there are many people, very generous people, who use their hard-earned wealth to finance various organizations and some projects like the finding what do you call the vaccine for this virus, and some of them have been successfully developed certain vaccine, and may they continue their support to help them, and may they be relieved from all samsaric suffering. There are many of our friends and others we even don't know whose relatives passed away due to COVID-19, and they have been grieving. May they be free from grief and understand Dhamma and liberate themselves from samsaric suffering. Overall, may we want to wish every one of you be peaceful, happy, and liberate from samsaric suffering. And finally, I must thank you all for encouraging us to spend this time